Welcome to the Liturgy Resources Podcast, where we talk about the liturgy, liturgical music, and Catholic worship from the perspective of a priest. Hi, I'm Father Kyle Sanders and a musician.
Hi, I'm Eric Wilkes.
We're glad that you could join us this week for episode 48 as we talk about the first three paragraphs of Pope Pius XII's encyclical, Mediator Dei, on the sacred liturgy. So I wanted to give first of all, welcome back. It has been a while since we have had an episode, pretty much January, I think.
Oh my goodness. Little hiatus for life.
Yeah, and it's now June. We apologize for that. There's just life. Life was lifing. But we are glad to be back, and we're going to be setting up a regular schedule to put out episodes every other week, so that it's a little less burdensome on us, but we also want to continue to provide as much content as we can to you, to be a resource for you about liturgy and liturgical music. So glad to be back with you, Eric. How you been?
Been good. Yeah, just raising them babies, and yeah, as you said, life is just lifing. So yeah. But I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to dive into this encyclical a little bit more, and I'm really, if I'm being honest, I'm excited to learn from you more about this. And so yeah, I think it's gonna be good. How have you been?
Yeah, I've been good. Parish has been going well. Pentecost was awesome. We just celebrated Pentecost, and so the Lord is doing good things, and been reflecting on just on parish and stuff, and yeah, it seems to be going pretty well, and glad to be back doing this, and hopefully we can get into a regular rhythm for y'all, so that you're not like, where did the podcast go? Anyway, we were asking the same question.
Yeah.
We had the same answer that you did.
No, I don't know.
Anyway, so we wanted to we finished our first document. We're now in the second document. And this goes from being an apostolic letter into a full encyclical, written by Pope Pius XII. It was promulgated on November 20th, 1947. So this is approximately 2 years after the end of World War II. And it's, to my knowledge, and let us know, but I think it's it's certainly of the 20th century, the first papal document specifically devoted to the liturgy. And it's really a foundation and a starting point for the liturgical renewal that happened with the Second Vatican Council. And it provides this systematic treatment of the church's worship, which is kind of cool. Like, we really haven't had any systematic look at the liturgy maybe since the Council of Trent, which was 500 years earlier.
Yeah.
So to give some background, almost 100 years before this, there began what was called the liturgical movement in France among certain Benedictine monasteries who spent considerable time reflecting on the depth and breadth of the church's liturgy at that moment and throughout the history of the church. Now, I think by this point, mid-1800s, this is 400 years into the celebration of the Tridentine liturgy. Most people just taken liturgy for granted and hadn't really attempted to pursue the depths of its mystery. Or saints had done so in prayer, but not necessarily in some sort of systematic, academic, theological way. Sort of in the vein of the Summa Theologica, but specifically focused on the liturgy. But with the intermingling of the nations due to World War I, and the movement of ideas that happened because of that, this liturgical French movement, this French liturgical movement grew significantly. So it was moved on to Germany and England and Italy, and what was connected with this was also this growing awareness that the culture of the West was quickly and dramatically moving away from the faith, which of course only intensified with the Second World War. And so I think this document is an attempt both to bring back an understanding of a global understanding of the Roman liturgy, and to understand that this really is to speak to the greatest difficulty of the time, which is human brokenness, which is just, I think more than ever, with not just with the war, but with the atrocities of the Holocaust and the atomic bombs. Like, there's a lot of human brokenness that's just manifested itself in the previous years.
Right.
And so it's really speaking that really the liturgy, which is an encounter with the cross, an encounter with Christ, is the answer to the questions that arose after this. So the document is divided into 4 parts. The first part of the document is the nature and the development of the liturgy. There's an introduction, but then once it gets into it, first part's on the nature and development of the liturgy. The second part is on the nature of the Eucharist and worship and the Mass. Part 3 is on the liturgy of the hours, or the divine office, I think, is as it was called then. And then part 4 is on the pastoral application of all of these principles, essentially. Like how do you take the principles and then bring them into reality? So I think the goal of the document in general is to restrain the excesses that were in the liturgy, and also to spur half-hearted effort and lukewarm effort into greater effect, like to really encourage and like light a spark in the life of and worship of the church. So yeah, I think it's a very prescient document for 1947, but I think it has a lot that it can show us in 2025, or if you're listening to this in 2055, God bless you. We're glad that somebody's listening to us 30 years after we've recorded this, which would very humbling.
Yeah.
It won't happen.
But maybe.
We'll see.
Yeah. Man, I'm looking at the timeline of this, and yeah, just the like you said, there was like a 500-year gap. And I was like, when you talk about history, like 100 years or 500 years, like that's like, oh, that's not that bad in the scope of all of human history.
Right.
But like, that's a pretty huge chunk of time. Like, if I was standing right here and I'm thinking 500 years into the future, something's going to happen, I'm like, dude, that's so far away.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of blowing my mind. It's also, I just think really awesome that there's this response from the church in this time of deep need for humanity to have like hope and an anchor, and that the church is responding by like, let's look at one of the greatest gifts that we have, which is prayer through the liturgy, right?
Yeah.
It's like, this is how we worship. Let's look at this and take care of it, and like, just articulate this. And I love that you said that there was kind of this guarding against of half-hearted effort or lukewarm practicing of the liturgy, that there, like, the church in her wisdom was like, we need to check ourselves.
Yeah.
We need to check ourselves, and we need to do this for the greater good of global humanity, who at the time is really going through it,
Right.
And I was like, man, because I think of all the stuff just today. I mean, it's 2025, and you can just you could just throw throw a dart at the board and you'll hit something that it's like some reason that we today could use some hope, and so as an individual, it's super encouraging to see, like, this is how individuals responded, but also the church at large responded to what was going on at the time. And it definitely, I'm thinking, we talked a little bit about the Eucharistic Congress and this Eucharistic revival and things like that. These which I feel like was a response, to, hey, like, like we as a church are here for our community members, but also like, hey world, like we have a hope, and his name's Jesus, and we believe that, like he exists in the presence of the Eucharist, and like we want to share that with the world. And so it's just super encouraging that at the time this was a priority. It's super encouraging that they were like, hey, let's look at this, articulate it, and check ourselves, and make sure that we're doing this well for the sake of humanity, and to make disciples of all nations. And like, how can we do that better? You know? So that's really cool.
You want to get into it?
Yeah, let's dive in, man.
So the style of Pope Pius XII is a little bit more elevated, a little less direct than Pius X. Pius X, I feel like his words were kind of blunt objects.
Yeah.
Pius XII is a little bit more elevated. It's more beautiful, to be honest, just to his prose, or at least translated into English. So yeah. So we'll go through it. We're gonna try to go through the first three thingamajiggies. Paragraphs, that's the word I was looking for.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, mediator between God and man. Let's start over. Venerable brother. This is a podcast.
You got this.
No, but
it's like you only do this for a living.
Yes. Okay. Venerable brethren, health and apostolic benediction. Mediator between God and men, and high priest who has gone before us into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, quite clearly had one aim in view when he undertook the mission of mercy, which was to endow mankind with the rich blessings of supernatural grace. Told you.
Yeah, you weren't kidding. This is beautiful. That's one sentence. Oh my gosh. I'm excited. I am excited.
And then, like, he goes right into it. Sin had disturbed the right relationship between man and his creator. The Son of God would restore it. The children of Adam were wretched heirs to the infection of original sin. He would bring them back to their heavenly Father, the primal source and final destiny of all things. So, like, he's setting up that the liturgy is really getting at the heart of the difficulty of mankind. Like, it's not some ancillary thing. It's not something that's secondary. It's not something that, like, you only do, because that's what traditions, like, no, like, this is a vital part of the experience of Christ's mission and act of his salvific act.
Yeah.
Right? That he's undoing what Adam has done, or what Adam did, and continues to do that. Like, this is like, I love it. Okay.
Yeah, this is awesome.
For this reason, he was not content while he dwelt with us on earth merely to give notice that redemption had begun, and to proclaim the long-awaited kingdom of God, but he gave himself besides in prayer and sacrifice to the task of saving souls, even to the point of offering himself as he hung from the cross, a victim unspotted unto God, to purify our conscience of dead works, to serve the living God.
Man.
This first paragraph is essentially the kerygma. Like,
yeah,
this is the content of our faith. Like, he's poetically and with his prose describing the creed. Right?
Yeah, It's beautiful.
It is.
The language he's using. I'm like, oh my goodness. Anyway, I could dive in. I'm like, oh, I like that. I like that.
What do you like? Let's dive in.
I love the primal source and final destiny of all things.
Yeah.
My goodness. Like, what a great description of something almost undescribable, right?
That's essentially the Alpha and the Omega, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but what a cool way to say that.
So Christ, or if you want to use the Vatican II language, the source and the summit.
Right, exactly.
Right, the Christ is, but also the liturgy, because the liturgy is connecting us to him, is the source and summit of all things. Yes.
Yeah, I just like that. I love the language there. Also, like to purify our conscience of dead works to serve the living God. Like that's so beautiful.
It puts into stark contrast both our inadequacy and God's power.
Yeah,
those two are to understand God's power. We must also understand our inadequacy. Like, can't be one or the other.
Right.
And but then he continues, right? Thus happily were all men summoned back from the byways leading them down to ruin and disaster, to be set squarely once again upon the path that leads to God. Thanks to the shedding of the blood of the Immaculate Lamb, now each might set about to the personal task of achieving his own sanctification, so rendering to God the glory due to him.
Man. This man, he is a poet. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I imagine, if somebody understood, if there was a Latin person that actually read this in the Latin, it'd be even more beautiful.
Oh yeah.
But I don't think that's either of us. Actually, I know it's not me, and I'm pretty sure it's not you. So, but yeah.
Yeah.
This kind of this image of being summoned back from the byways, gives me this image of the parable of the father who is setting a wedding celebration for his son and invites all of their friends, but they all say no. And so he sends the servants out to the byways and the highways to gather into himself anyone that they find.
Yeah.
Right. So he's kind of like making a reference to that parable, but also like the parable of the, to go to the narrow path. Like that, there's so it's like he's bringing together these like gospel parables in this clear like understanding of both our inadequacy and God's glory.
Yeah. It feels like that. It feels like it like there's these poetic nods to these specific scripture references.
Yeah. And there are like quotes. I mean, there are footnotes, right? Where it references. Dang it, I had it all queued up and then it moved. With references to 1 Timothy and Hebrews.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Paragraph 2 continues on. But what is more? I love it. Like, this isn't the end of the good news. The divine Redeemer has willed that the priestly life, begun with the supplication and sacrifice of his mortal body, should continue without intermission down the ages in his mystical body, which is the Church. Which is a reference. Let's see. He also wrote a document called Mystici Corporis in 1943. So he's probably also talking about the Church.
Right.
Although he doesn't make a footnote I think that's in reference to, I've talked about the mystical body of the church and the Eucharist is kind of like this both connection.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is why he established a visible priesthood to offer everywhere the clean oblation, referencing the Council of Trent's talking about the Mass and the Eucharist, which would enable men from east to west, freed from the shackles of sin, to offer God that unconstrained and voluntary homage which their conscience dictates. I've been going through with OCIA talking about sin. We were like in preparation for talking about the sacrament of confession. We've been talking about sin, and so we go we go through the section on the Catechism with regards to the understanding of the conscience, and that the conscience needs to be formed. Like, although we have a conscience that is this movement of both God and the good spirit to lead us towards good, but it's also dependent upon our human formation and our intellectual formation of the understanding both of the moral law and that is communicated through the scriptures and through the teaching of the church. And so this idea that the celebration of the Mass is something that conscience dictates, I think would surprise a lot of people. Like, that my conscience dictates that this sacrificial act needs to happen and needs to continue, and that I need to unite my sacrificial act with that, and conscience dictates that that's the case. I think for many Catholics, well, maybe the Catholics that go to Mass, I think they recognize that, even though they may not be able to communicate it as such. Like, if you ask them, why do you go to Mass on every Sunday? Because I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
So conscience dictates, right? That even if they're not able to communicate, right? But there's a whole host of Catholics, and maybe who haven't been formed or haven't, or ignoring their conscience, which we've all done.
Yeah. But I would say even it is kind of this to offer God that unconstrained and voluntary homage which their conscience dictates. And I was thinking of kind of this. I was thinking of like even folks that I've known that maybe aren't practicing Catholics or even Christian, I've noticed an irony. I'll either see something that they share or just being around them, and something good will happen, and what do they say? They say, "Oh, thank God."
Yeah.
And it always just kind of strikes me every time I see something like that, because I'm like, it feels like this prayer, it feels like and what does the Eucharist mean? I mean, Thanksgiving, right? And so if you extend that moment and you organize it, it almost is kind of this innate human thing that it and there's all kinds of, I was listening to podcasts, there's like these scientific studies, like neurologists that are showing like we benefit from prayer, or like physically, right? And so it's like it's instinctive, not only on like a social level, but it also is there's kind of this positive physical response biologically. And so to have this unconstrained voluntary homage to offer to God, like, feels very human. And to your point, to the varying degrees of the formation of the conscience, like, depending on where you're at, there's going to be some level of that. And so, but I love I love that he was able to, again, so beautifully and succinctly say that.
Yeah.
It's like it is a very good natural human thing to want to say thank you to God, and we do this as Catholics through the liturgy which he gave us. So very cool.
I love that. I'll let that sink in.
Yeah.
It's sort of the praise be the Lord.
Yeah. That's what I was offering, my layman's perspective of like.
It's really good. Yeah.
But yeah.
It also should give those who are discouraged by the lack of the loss of things, like it's not as bad as we think it is. And the Lord, even though there are barriers for people to return, the Lord can break those down quickly, and especially if there's it's not that their conscience hasn't been formed at all, right? It's just not as good as it could be, right? So it's still there, and even ours, like it's even us who are in the faith are continuing to have our conscience formed.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
And our will to follow our conscience.
Right, that's true. You might know. My 2-year-old knows the right thing to do, and I gotta tell you, he doesn't always do it. So.
Yeah.
And he gives me this cheeky little look too. He looks over at me like I'm about to do the bad thing. I'm like, well, it's a mutual understanding, and then we have a loving and firm discussion. More loving, hopefully, but yeah. And that's what the Lord does with us as we form our conscience wherever we're at. Yeah.
So he continues you can see that he's building up to something, right? He's kind of talking global, and now he goes in specific, talking about, that Christ has established this unbroken priesthood to offer sacrifice to the Father.
Right.
In obedience, therefore, in paragraph 3, to her founder's behest, the Church prolongs the priestly mission of Jesus Christ mainly by means of the sacred liturgy. She does this in the first place at the altar, where constantly the sacrifice of the cross is represented, which is quoting the Council of Trent. And with a single difference in the manner of its offering renewed, which is also a reference to Council of Trent. So a difference in the manner of the offering, right? Christ isn't being re-crucified, right? And so the manner of the offering, the way that theological would put it, is in an unbloody manner, right? She does it next by means of the sacraments, those special channels through which men are made partakers in the supernatural life. She does it finally by offering to God, all good and great, the daily tribute of her prayer of praise. What a spectacle for heaven and earth, observes our predecessor of happy memory, Pius XI. And this is from Pius XI's encyclical or letter on the Sacred Heart. And he says, what a spectacle from heaven and earth is not the Church at prayer. For centuries, without interruption, from midnight to midnight, the divine psalmody of the inspired canticles is repeated on earth. There is no hour of the day that is not hallowed by its special liturgy. There is no state of human life that has not its part in the thanksgiving, praise, supplication, and reparation of this common prayer of the mystical body of Christ, which is his Church.
I got goosebumps on that one.
Which is I think is in reference to the Liturgy of the Hours, or the divine office.
Right.
That
I love that.
It's, each priest is required to pray 5 times a day. Religious sometimes pray 7 times a day or more, right, in community. So if you have that for 24 time zones, you're having prayer that is happening at every hour of every day.
Yeah.
Throughout the whole of the day. that there's never a time when the church is not praying and interceding on behalf of the church. And this is connected too. This is part of the priestly act of the church, of offering this sacrifice of praise, the daily tribute of her prayer of praise. So, yeah, it is very beautiful. From midnight to midnight.
That's the one. I was like,
that
sounds so cool.
Yeah, I was about to say that's a lyric. I gotta write that one down.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, we got to do something with that. It's like a musician cannot hear the words from midnight to midnight and like just walk by that phrase. You know, it's like, oh, I see you.
That's a lyric line.
I see you, cool lyric line. I mean, yeah, I mean, these guys, it's just beautiful. It's also, yeah, I mean, the meaning behind that as well. Like you described, there's never a moment and where the church isn't interceding. And that's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
To know that, like, essentially the world is covered in prayer by the church. Wow.
And that this liturgy, right, is the in obedience, right? It's something that the church does not because she has created it, but because she has been called to do it.
Right.
To her founder's behest, right? Continues this through the liturgy. And he makes those kind of three things. One, the liturgy of the Mass, right? Which is the first place. In the second place, the liturgy of the rest of the sacraments by which he communicates his grace. And then three, by the liturgy of the hours. So these are the three aspects of liturgical life, the liturgical life of the church. And all of them are connected, right? They're not separate from. That's why, especially after the Second Vatican Council, we can see this, that with all of the sacraments now, you can celebrate them within the liturgy, which wasn't something that happened prior to, that they were, the other sacraments were, other liturgical celebrations disconnected in time from the Mass, right? You would never have a baptism during Mass. Confirmation would not happen during a Mass. It would be, they would be separate from, at least the way that I understand that. If I am wrong, please somebody tell me. I am okay with being wrong and being corrected with most things.
Right, yeah. In theory, right? In practice, it stings a little bit, at least for me. But yeah. No, that's really neat. I didn't know that. So they would have standalone sacramental celebrations,
right?
Wow.
And we still the confession is probably the only one that happens during Mass. But anointing of the sick, I don't think, was only something that happened in homes, right? But now it can happen in a communal setting, within the Mass. I think ordination probably would have happened in a Mass, just because of the kind of what's happening. But yeah, I don't think confirmation, and certainly baptism, were not connected to liturgy until after the Second Vatican Council. I mean, yeah, again, if I'm wrong, please let me know. I want to continue. We're using a new recording thing, and I haven't figured out exactly how to know how long we've been recording. So
that's a good point.
Yeah,
I think. Oh, I see it. There's a time.
Oh, you do.
I think we're at 33 minutes.
Okay, well,
we're going on 34.
We'll go ahead and stop here then. But I'm looking forward to continuing this, going through this document. Because this is just the introduction. We haven't even gotten to the first part yet.
That's incredible.
Is it separated? No, not really. But yeah. So we'll dive into that next well, in the future, not in the next episode, but in the future. But thank you for joining us this week, and for coming back to listen to us after a 5-month hiatus. Please like and subscribe on iTunes. That does so much to help us reach as many people as possible. Also, check us out on the Catholic streaming app Theo, which is now streaming Catholic music, which is exciting. I think you can find some of Will's music on there. And you can find our show notes at liturgyresourcespodcast.com. You can find resources and compositions for liturgical music, especially our liturgy planning guide, at liturgyresources.com. And the best way to interact with us is on Instagram at Liturgy Resources Podcast, which we will be much more active on. Please follow us there and keep on singing.